to order. We are looking today at chapter 2, cooking up new rituals. So you were each asked to think about some kind of life cycle event that you might want to create a new ritual to commemorate. But I thought we could start off, maybe Debbie, I'll start with you and I'll move through the screens here, talking about a ritual in your past that you have experienced that when you think about it, it's a source of meaning. And it could be, you know, something sad, a funeral or a deathbed experience. It could be a memorable birthday celebration. It could be something that happened in the life of a child or a grandchild. So I'll start off and then I'm going to turn it to Debbie so you can all be thinking about how to answer this question. My initial reaction when I was thinking about it this morning was I thought about my wedding to Ron, which was about 3.5 years ago. And, you know, it was such a beautiful and memorable and powerful experience to be under the chuppah and look into his eyes and, you know, so much love and joy. But then when I thought about it a little more, I also thought about the fact of when I married David, I went to the mikveh the night before I got married. And my friend, Rabbi Devorah Bartnoff of blessed memory, took me to the mikveh, and she did a whole meditation while I was laying in the bathtub about letting go of any negativity that there might have been in the relationship. You know, there are always little hurts and challenges and hurdles, and then transitioning to the mikveh itself and the joy and the anticipation of entering into that relationship. And I've ever since then, I've always had a very special connection to the mikveh as a ritual experience. And I've had occasion as a rabbi to facilitate many, many, many mikvahs for people, most often for people who are converting or sometimes people who are getting married. Those are the traditional times that people use a mikvah in Jewish ritual practice. But then also one time, very memorably, a male colleague called me and said he had a congregant who had been raped and wanted to know if I could create a mikvah ritual for her to help her move beyond that trauma. Or people who have been through very serious medical challenges, somebody who had had a double mastectomy and wanted to have a ritual to commemorate that transition. So transitions are always things that we want to take note of and mark and not let just get past us. So, you know, when I think about it right now as we're talking, I think about, you know, why it's so meaningful that we have a mezuzah on the doorway of our house. Why? That's a transition point, you know, where we're moving from the public to the private domain, and we want to mark that location as a place of transition. We have a bar and bat mitzvah when a child reaches a certain age. We don't want these things to just go by without capturing them. So you saw in the book, the authors talk about the vehicle of Havdalah, which is a wonderful vehicle for commemorating significant transitions, because the ritual of Havdalah is itself about the transition between Shabbat and the rest of the week. So it's a very Jewish notion, this notion that we want to stop throughout our lives on our journey and notice when changes are taking place, small and large, happy and painful, and just find ways of commemorating those occasions and perhaps sharing them with friends, loved ones, and community. So given that, Joel, you're joining us late. The challenge was share a ritual of transition that you have experienced in your life that was meaningful. And Debbie is the first one.
I'm going to try. I don't know that I see it maybe as a ritual of transition, but well, as a little bit of preface to this, I grew up in Cleveland, as did my cousin and my aunt and my brother. And just every holiday, whether it be Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, when we were eating, or break the fast, or Passover, it just seemed to be a ritual. At that time, in my younger years, the women would go into the kitchen after dinner, or even, and the men would go into the living room. And just washing the dishes, we would just talk about just about everything, about whether it be what's happening in our life then, or about somebody in the family, how they are. And my cousin happens to live out here now, as does my brother and sister-in-law, and we're out here. And it's almost become a ritual. We go in the kitchen, we talk about how everybody's doing. Now the men are in there.
That's interesting.
But it's a warm, fuzzy ritual for me.
What a brilliant insight. Who would think of that as being a ritual moment rather than just being a chore? But, I love that you're able to see it through that lens as, a meaningful ingathering of your tribe.
Yeah, it's special. And unfortunately this year, Pesach, we couldn't get together, but we will in the future. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Joe and Carol, you can each have an opportunity to tell us something that comes to mind.
For me, I guess the only thing I'm thinking of right now, and first of all, I'm not that much of a ritual person. I'm always forward thinking. So when a point hits, it's like a milestone on a highway, and I just can't look forward to the next, whatever that's going to be. But I guess the most recent one that I can think of is 5 years ago when I retired. It was kind of a mixed feeling. You finally make the decision to move on, and you let people know, and then people start looking at you kind of like, I guess it's kind of that lame duck feeling. Why are you dragging this out for 3 months or whatever? My manager at the time had asked me to stay on longer because they needed to find somebody to take over my space, and it was going to take a while to train that person and so on. But to me, it was like I can only equate it to coming out of a subway tunnel or a train station at times, out into the fresh air after, or even an airport after you've been hanging around the airport. It's always, to me, arduous at times traveling, because I used to travel often when I was working. That the one thing I was looking forward to is getting off the plane or getting off the train and getting out into the fresh air again. And kind of that was the feeling that I had of transitioning from my work environment into the next chapter of my life, which was getting out and into the bright sunshine and looking at all the fresh air and the whole new world that was out there for me. So that was kind of it. You going to pass on this, or you want to?
No.
Go ahead.
No, I have something to say.
Let me just respond to Joe, because I think it's a very interesting analogy, Joe. Taking a breath of fresh air, mm-hmm. And I'm wondering that when we look at all of these markers of rituals, and we'll look at some of the ways that are suggested to commemorate these kinds of transitions. I don't think anybody mentions breathing specifically, but as we've talked about mindfulness and meditation and the importance of the breath and the connection of this breath and the soul, I think that's something that maybe they missed, that could be added in if we were going to create a ritual, to actually use that metaphor as part of whatever ritual activities we were doing, to include breathing in that sense of taking a breath. I really like that. Okay,
Good.
Carol, yes.
Well, when we first moved to Arizona, and then our children came at different times, we had a ritual of every Sunday going out to dinner. But we would go out, since we were spread in such a way, it was like a triangle. So one week we'd eat in the Scottsdale area, and one week we'd eat in the Phoenix area where Steve lived, and one week we'd eat out in Gilbert where Barbara is. And it's really very nice. Unfortunately, it didn't keep up. Things have changed over the years. Steve now works on Sundays, so it makes it very, very difficult. And of course, with the virus, that crushes everything. But eventually, once it's all over, I'm hoping that maybe we could start it again, just not every week. Maybe we'll do it once a month or something, just so we could all be together. It really means a lot to me. Family always has meant a lot to me.
You know, what's emerging from your input is the broad creativity about what constitutes a ritual. You know, Joe, when you say you're not much of a ritual person, so you think about ritually washing hands or lighting Shabbat candles or putting on a talit. We think about those are rituals in a classic sense. But when we open our aperture a little bit, and we look at washing the dishes and going out for Sunday night dinner as also important and meaningful rituals in our lives, I think we can see how important ritual actually is for us. And it's just a question of how do we define what is a ritual.
I think I can just add one more thing, with our back row group on Friday nights when we are able to go to the temple. Frank's just joining us now, but we have the fun time of after services, which is, I think, almost as important to some of us as the service itself, of joining up with dinner right after the service. So I think that ritual, if you will, has gotten very important to a lot of people.
So, I'm also hearing the thread of the washing the dishes after dinner, the Sunday family night dinner, the Friday night dinner. So sharing food together is definitely, and our authors do talk about that as part of crafting rituals. What we're going to eating together is a very important part of social connection. And probably, one of the things that we're missing a lot here is just not being able to have meals together with other people. We've had a number of successful Zoom happy hours with other folks, and found them to be surprisingly satisfying. So we're not sharing food together, but we are each having our own adult beverages. So that's been a little bit helpful and satisfying. I think Sharona Silverman and I had a Zoom lunch date one day, which we each set up our computers, and we sat and talked, and we each ate lunch in our own houses. Frank, we're talking about rituals in our past that have been meaningful to us. And a wealth of creativity has emerged, expanding on the definition of what is a ritual. So Debbie spoke beautifully about the ritual of washing dishes together after the Passover Seder, and how that connected the women in the family. And Carol was talking about going out to dinner as a family every Sunday night. So we're kind of going around. Before we look forward at rituals we might want to create, we're each sharing something that we have experienced. I talked about going to the mikveh before I married David, and how what an impact that had on me. So Myra, it's your turn.
Okay. I have a tremendous new ritual, and that is I look on my calendar and I look on my Gmail and I see what Zoom is going to be today or tomorrow or whatever. And this is a marvelous vehicle for me to see people. I live alone and I'm enjoying this new ritual of being able to talk to you and to share things on my Gmail, like jokes. I've always shared jokes, but more and more jokes. I think it's marvelous, and I hope we keep it up. Not the coronavirus bit, but being able to share with the rituals of seeing people that I ordinarily would not see.
So, and also just what you described, the ritual perusal of the calendar, that's become part of your daily practice. You know, I live and die by the calendar. You know, I'm not one of these people who wants, you know, a lot of surprises in my life. If I could have the calendar for the rest of my life all downloaded and organized, it would be just perfectly okay with me. I love to have everything planned out in advance. And Ron is exactly the opposite. When we were first getting together, his comment that was so jarring and surprising to me was, I'll know what I'm doing after I've done it. So, you know, just antithetical to my way of looking at things. And yet, you know, I've you know, become a little more open to his way of doing things as well. But I do enjoy the ritual. What we do, Myra, is we'll sit down with both of our phones and go through the calendar by day. What are you doing? What am I doing? Oh, I forgot to tell you I have this. You know, let's, you know, when can we plan for that? And it fills my heart with joy. I love organizing the calendar. So I can really relate to what you're saying, getting up, looking at the calendar. What's on the agenda today?
Me? What's on my agenda?
No, I'm just saying I can appreciate the joy that brings you.
Unfortunately, I will have to leave early because I have a Yiddish study group.
Oh,
There you go, an abundance of riches. Lori, is there a ritual you've experienced in your life that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, getting together with an old friend that I haven't, that I kind of lost touch with, and getting together with her monthly as well as one of her friends, and the three of us have become quite close. So that's one that I've enjoyed in the past before this. And then a ritual that has started since this has been getting together with college roommates that I haven't been in touch with very much. We talk about an annual reunion, which last year didn't happen. And so now we've been Zooming weekly and catching up on each other's lives in the way that we haven't in the past after all the years, and talking about old times and current things. So that's what I think of.
So ritualizing opportunities for connection, which is really important, because if you don't do that, they can get away from us so easily.
And then kind of like what Mara was saying, I really totally look forward to the Zooms. I live alone as well, and I feel like I'm with people. So that's been great.
You are.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, everyone, Thursdays at 3:30 is the socialize while distancing. If you need that Zoom link, let me know, but that's another opportunity to connect. Craig.
Oh, there. Hi, sorry, I was muted.
Yeah, no, we understand.
So, first of all, Havdalah, that's just my favorite ritual. I just love, yeah. So, but,
What is it that you love about it?
well, I think it's kind of mystical. I was born like at the last few minutes of Shabbat. And I think that kind of is part of my connection to Havdalah. But it's just such a sweet thing, you know, when you're standing there in the candlelight and the blessings and the spices, and I just love it. So
The tactile aspect of it appeals to you.
just it's such a sweet time. It's just I don't know how to describe it any better than that. But yeah. So moving along, you know, hiking is a ritual for me. I just barely got here under the wire because I was out on a hike, and I just, you know, it just fills me up and lifts me up. So it's so good to be out in the sunshine. But I am starting on this decluttering project at home, and I was thinking about that and this chapter, and I think I'm gonna have, every time I get a chunk of things cleaned up, I am going to sage the room and say the Anabacoa for it. And I think that's going to be my ritual and kind of a pat on the back for me to, you know, make it go well.
So you're going to have a ritual letting go.
Yeah, and kind of a welcoming to the new clean space. So that's what I was thinking about that.
Yeah, that's neat. The authors talk about, you know, moving from one home to another, downsizing, or closing up a parent's home, and what kind of ritual we might want to commemorate that moment. But, you know, even on a smaller scale, what you're pointing out is we can still notice and commemorate the transition even within the same space.
Well, it's kind of connected to that because I inherited my mom's stuff, and it's been a real process to distinguish what's sentimental and worth keeping, and so it's been an ongoing thing. So it's partly wrapped up in that. So I guess
it's hard to let go of that stuff.
Yeah. So enough time has passed, and it's not quite so emotional.
Yeah, there could be a lot of guilt associated with that. You know, if it was so precious to someone who was precious to us, then how do we make that decision to let go? Right,
exactly. And Zoom is like filling in for all the Valley Beit Midrash I can't go to anymore. So.
Well, they're doing some things online too. Are you connecting up with that?
Yeah, I've been doing things on there, but it's, you know, I can't wait until we can get out of our house. So that's where I'm at.
Good. Jane, what's coming to mind?
Well, I had, back in February 2003, I had open heart surgery, and it was a difficult one. And every year since then, my daughter and my grandkids, we go away on a vacation together to celebrate it. You know, that I survived it, that I got through it, and then I'm still going on. And we go away to the beach mainly and drink a glass of wine. The kids drink grape juice, but we celebrate that.
Yeah. That's such a great example, you know, of a truly deeply important and significant lifestyle, a life cycle transition that you experienced, and you found a unique way to commemorate and celebrate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Joel, how are you? What meaningful experiences are coming up for you as we're talking about this?
I've never had any. No. I would say there was a very difficult trip. We've been in Phoenix for almost 50 years. Actually, this coming December will be 50 years. And I came from Pittsburgh, and Cheryl came from Cincinnati, and I came from a very ritualistic family. We belong to the most reformed turn of the century congregation, no bat mitzvah, no b'nai mitzvahs, etc. But since my father had no Jewish training and basically grew up tough in the streets, it was incredibly important for him to have his two sons be exposed to bar mitzvahs. So we also belong to the most from Orthodox facility in Pittsburgh. So I was the ritual of weekends I spent at the temple, and Monday through Thursday I was picked up by a bus to go to Hebrew Institute. And so we were incredibly overexposed to a lot of stuff. And my brother obviously became a rabbi probably because of that. And I kind of went the other way, meaning I said, okay, I'm done after my confirmation from the temple. And we moved out here when we were very, very young, obviously, 21. And we did nothing Jewish for a long time, which was not sitting well with Cheryl. And for me, it really didn't matter. I was tired of it, etc. And it took a number of years for me to kind of come back and realize I was missing a lot of the things that I had grown up with and that I was accustomed to. And then, you know, years went by and we belonged to a couple different temples, and then joined Chai, and I was integrally involved in being the co-chair of the building of the campus in the late 80s. But that was kind of a business decision on my part to try to help, and it had very little to do with spirituality, et cetera. And I would say that the most meaningful ritual for me, and Joe actually kind of took it right out of my mouth, which is that several years ago, after even Temple High not being really on my radar very much through a number of years, we decided we both missed going to services, and we may try out different synagogues and temples. And I said, well, look, we still belong to Temple High. Why don't we start there? And we came in really hardly knowing anybody or not seeing people for a long time. And really thanks to Frank and Diane Blake more than anybody else, and also the Newmans, who we didn't really know at the time, we were welcomed with a feeling of familial embracement that literally it's a one-stop shop, and Cheryl and I both instantly felt comfortable, and that has evolved into this new ritual of most Friday nights being at services Friday, and then going to dinner, you know, with the back row afterwards. And that is one of the most meaningful rituals in my 50-year existence here in Phoenix.
I love to hear that.
I wasn't patronizing you, Rob.
Still, it makes my heart sing.
Yay for Joel.
Frank, in thinking back on your life, what's a ritual moment, a transition that was meaningful and important for you, and you commemorated it in a way that you still remember?
A couple of things, and I was thinking about it from last week. For me, and I think Diane tagged along with me because I've been more sentimental with this, is to acknowledge major milestones in our lives and major milestones of our marriage. And I've always said, you know, I want to celebrate the 25th anniversary. I want to celebrate the 40th anniversary. I want to celebrate the 50th anniversary. And I want to celebrate it with friends and family. Because for me, you know, I could say to Diane, it was great, but I wanted to have the enjoyment with my friends and family. And that's who I consider our extended family. So ritualistically, the anniversaries, ritualistically, also major milestones of birthdays, be it the 50th or 65th or the 70th or the 75th, we would try to have a celebration where we invited our village and share that type of good ritualistic flavor. With all the stuff that's going on currently, one of the things I did want to share with the group was I felt Diane wanted to leave all her jewelry to our granddaughter, Maya. And I said, why are we going to wait after? Why don't we do it now? While you can see her, you can see the enjoyment that she possibly could get from this. So this weekend, she came over and we went through the whole jewelry box. And it was amazing how much jewelry Diane had built up. But for the most part, a lot of it was, we told a story about each item that we passed on. And whether it was the engagement ring, which was more emotional for me than anything, to the wedding ring, to other items that we collected on the way, be it items that we got through the Temple High Gala events that we purchased. So we told a quick story about where the origination of some of the jewelry was. And Maya was very interested to know all this. And we said, we knew that she wouldn't probably keep half this stuff, but she was very great about accepting it, acknowledging it, and hopefully takes it home and whatever she wants to do with it at this point in time. So it was a very nice type of a ritual that we had.
That's another amazing example. I don't know if you signed on before, like when Debbie Rubin started off, she was talking about the ritual of washing the dishes together after the Passover Seder. And you're talking about, you know, passing on the jewelry to the next generation, you know, all of these things that, you know, examples that I don't think would necessarily have occurred to me, but they're just so really genuinely touching to hear, and, you know, perfect, great examples of moments of meaningful transition in our lives. And, you know, it's interesting what you say that, you know, there's an expression, it's better to give with a warm hand than a cold hand. So you know, you're exactly exemplifying that, you know, give it when you could see her face light up with the joy.
Right, right.
Is there anything you want to tell us about how today is in your house?
Right now it's status quo. Just making her comfortable as possible is the goal at this time. Having a little bit of difficulty with caregivers coming in at night. We think we have somebody coming in. Next thing you know, one person called up and said, well, my husband's coworker was just tested positive. So I'm quarantining myself. Well, we find this out like 4 hours before she's supposed to come. And the last day we had somebody come in. So I spent a whole bunch of time indoctrinating. And then she said, I'll see you in a couple of days. I said, what do you mean I'll see you in a couple of days? How about tonight? No, I'm not coming tonight. So I'm back calling the agency saying, what the heck is going on? How come we can't find somebody that's going to be here on a consistent basis? So kind of frustrating.
Very frustrating.
Yep. Okay, enough.
Yeah, just keep breathing, Frank.
You got.
Yeah. Marilyn, how are you?
Doing fine.
Good. Well, what's your ritual?
Well, piggybacking on what Frank was just talking about, you know, connections with our grandchildren and family and friends. And we're very much into that. One of the things that I've been doing is calling friends that maybe I haven't heard from in a long time across the country, cousins, and some local people that we haven't seen in months. And so pick up the phone, call them, and so I'm just checking in on you, want to see how you're doing. And they kind of are like surprised, taken aback, some of them. And I find it rewarding to have them know that we're thinking of them and hoping for the best for them. So in continuation with what Frank was saying, as you know, we have millions of pictures in our house. We don't know where all of them are, or we're where things are and which cabinets and all. So we've been doing that and finding pictures of our kids when they were little, our parents, their grandparents, so that they'll have a connection. It's almost like a legacy book. The other day, Joel said, we're not doing that for us. We're doing it for our kids, so they'll know who we are and what our experiences were, and where we got our roots and our wings from. So yeah, my two kids remember very clearly their grandparents, but my granddaughters never have met them. They passed away before that. So we just want them to know and have like a family tree and an understanding who they were named for, that kind of thing. So we're working on putting that all into a book that we'll have for them.
Nice.
Oh,
I'm sure that'll be super meaningful.
It's really a lot of work.
It is.
In addition to all the photographs, we used to take slides. So now we're going through the slides and we've seen pictures we don't remember.
Well, if anyone has the aptitude to do it, it's your husband.
Yeah. Yep. He's really great.
You're lucky that he has those skills. A lot of people, when they want to engage in a project like that, have to hire a professional, but he is a professional.
We kind of started it last year when it was our 50th anniversary. And we had a lot of friends in town and relatives came, and we had that wonderful party, which was like a magical night for us.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we were very honored to be included in your celebration.
glad you were there.
Thank you.
But yeah, so that's what we're working on now. In the meantime, we're cleaning out cabinets and all kinds of boxes.
So you're with Craig also.
Brought a big box into the room I'm in, my office, and I took everything out of there. I have so many negatives, film negatives, that we can't even see. You hold it up to the light, you can't even see, who is this, Anyway, so I emptied that big box.
Hi, Joel. Nice to see you.
100 hours to go on the project.
You're the right man for the job.
I've got plenty of time. A lot of time.
Good. Well, you've got a lot of work, I'm sure. So, Sandy Copel.
Sandy Copel.
Yeah. Actually, when they were talking about things, it reminded me when we started getting to milestones like 75 and 80, we started doing things with the family. I remember for my husband's birthday, go skip over me because the phone is ringing.
My mother is the busiest 85-year-old quarantined person. I don't know what she's doing, but you can't get her attention. I still get from her, sorry, I can't talk right now. What are you doing? There's nothing going on. Quarantine.
It's fantastic.
All right. Well, she'll come back when she's ready. So I'm in the book now. I'm on page 23. I want to walk through some of and this chapter. As we've seen, the way this book is put together, the editors were Rabbi Laura Geller and Richard Siegel, but then they invited friends, colleagues, various individuals to participate with them and write different chapters. This chapter is actually written by the authors, and I like this line on the page 23. Rituals and ceremonies mark important transitions that a community wants to reflect on and use as teachable moments. So 2 criteria for rituals that they mention: an opportunity for reflection and also to take something away. So I think that applies to all of the rituals that we've each spoken about here. And then they are suggesting opportunities that we might want to consider looking forward that are ripe for ritual expression. So let's look on page 24 at and following some of the topics that they ask us to consider. One is a major birthday. I think that's pretty straightforward. You know, we all, you know, 65, 70, 80, you know, we know what those moments are that we want to mark. It's interesting, in Jewish tradition, there is a second bar mitzvah that takes place at the age of 83. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that, or if that's something that you might want to consider, but 70 is considered to be a full lifetime. So there's this concept of when you turn 83 of having a second bar mitzvah. So we might not think of that as a milestone birthday, but 83 is traditionally that kind of a milestone birthday. So you can tuck that one in the back of your head as you're thinking about times that you might want to celebrate. Children leaving home, probably most of us in this age group are past that age. Although, Lori, your son just left recently.
Yeah, he's 24. He left a year ago now.
Right. So what's become of his room?
It became a guest room, and the furniture has been moved more to my liking. There are still mementos, there are photographs of him and our family and us together. And my former husband, Paul, family's Dutch. So there's this amazing Dutch clock that is not on the wall, but is tucked away when Benjamin's ready to have it in his home. And so yeah, that's what's become of his room.
So what was that like for you? Because I know very often parents are reluctant to touch the room when the kids leave, and it becomes a shrine of unused space. The room stays exactly what it was like. So I think it's impressive that, you know, a year after he left, that you were able to repurpose that space. So what were the emotions that went with that?
Well, we together helped him clean out the room, of course, decide what he was going to take and just go through it. And that was before he left. And it was very helpful. His Dutch grandmother made these photo books, these albums that are like include photos and birthday calendar cards, things that we had sent her over the years that then she had put together in a beautiful book, and they're still here. So I get to revisit those. But mostly we cleaned out his room, which was real helpful because it really needed it.
So he was involved in the process. So I imagine that made it a little bit easier. It wasn't you having to make that wrenching decision of, okay, he's never coming back, and I'm gonna. Sometimes kids don't like that. You know, the parents clean out the room, and the kids are like, you know, wait a minute, that's still my room, even if I'm not living there. Mom, you're shaking your head. What? That wasn't me, was it? No, who? Unmute yourself, Mom. Sandy, unmute. Yeah.
Okay.
She smile there. What's the story?
No, I muted because I had a doctor call.
Yeah. No, we got that. So.
Okay. No, I only sent it to you.
One nice thing I'll say about that is there's some birthday cards that he was given on his last birthday, and they're still up in his room, and so that's nice.
So, Mom, you owe us two things. One, a ritual from your past. You were talking about the 75th, the 80th birthdays, and what you did with
right.
And then looking forward, it looked like you had a comment about it must be one of my brothers who didn't want their room touched.
But no, I don't
don't remember. I don't remember that far back because they sold that house about 35 years ago. You want me to remember that?
Richard,
You were smiling and shaking your head, so I thought you had, you were thinking of something.
Okay, we started with when we got older, and we started celebrating these, 5-year things, 60th anniversary, 50th birthday, 75th birthdays. We started to take our children away on trips. We rented a house in the Carolinas. We took a couple of cruises, and the last cruise we took.
Here's Richard.
When my husband was alive, was wonderful because it was like 3 months before he passed away, and it was so wonderful because we were all together. And since then, last year, I took the family away, and it was so nice. And I was 85, and I said, I can't wait till I'm 90. It's too long to wait for me to get the whole family together. So next year for Thanksgiving, we're going to try and go away someplace and have the whole family together. Because I can't wait that long at my age.
Yeah.
Do it while I can do it.
Yep. All right. So other comments? We talked about major birthdays. We talked about getting the kids leaving the nest or getting pushed out of the nest. Stopping full-time work. So Joe, you already talked about that. Who is still working in this group besides me? Is everybody else already retired? Okay.
Well, there's an old saying that realtors never really retire. They just run out of commission. And retirement was very, very, very difficult for me. And it's been, truth being told, it's been probably 8 years. And I had promised Cheryl I would retire at 60. And that was in 2008. And we had some pretty severe financial reversals during the economic crisis. And I said, no, I can't do that. And then I found reason after reason after reason. And retirement for me was amongst the most difficult things that I've ever done. Meaning I am the consummate people person. Plus the art of the deal and missing the action. And it was very, very difficult. So for the first couple of years, I said, okay, I'll do some deals for friends and family or family of friends and stuff like that. And did that. And then started feeling a little uncomfortable and started referring things more and doing less. But it was a real transition that took me probably 3 or 4 years to really get at all comfortable with. So anyway, that's my story. I mean, retirement was right up there with, I can't even relate to what Joe said about breathing fresh air and everything. To me, it was, I miss being in the car and showing property and negotiating and doing all that stuff. And even today, sometimes I will get that bug saying, I gotta do a deal. I gotta do something.
Yeah, I didn't retire till I was past 80s, and it was seamless.
So there's hope for me. Maybe I'll go back to work.
When I was about 78 or so, I started working 3 days a week or 4 days a week, and then I retired. I was 80 in 7 months. I remember exactly when it was, and it was easy. I had other interests, and it was time. And my husband wasn't 100% well at that time, so that took some time too.
Andy, I'm curious, what did you do?
I was a controller in a real estate office. I'm lucky that I worked that late because I have better computer skills than most of my friends. I'm not great, but at least I can Zoom and email and spreadsheets, and I'm very, very fortunate.
So my experience of retirement is with the Army. So I was in the Army from 1978 to 2016. So I retired after 38 years in the Army, and that was not hard. I was never one of those people who, you know, in the Army, you get the 20-year letter. And when you get your 20-year letter, it's a big, that in itself is a ritual moment to commemorate. People get very excited because that means you're now qualified for a pension from the Army. And there are a lot of people in the Army who work for that 20-year letter. And they get that letter and they drop their retirement paperwork, and that's the end of it. And I was never one of those people who said, oh, I can't wait to retire. I can't wait to retire. I can't wait to retire. But the last 2 years or so of my Army career, David had died. I met Ron. Ron and I were falling in love and getting married. And unlike David, who grew up with me being in the Army and, oh, you're going to Afghanistan for a month, I'll see you when you get back. You know, Ron was like, you know, what do you mean you're going to Salt Lake City over one night? I'm gonna miss you. Can I come with you? So it was like, you know, the relationships were very, very, very different. And I also had hit the glass ceiling in the Army. So there was no more challenge. There was no upward mobility. It had gotten to be kind of boring and mundane. So all those things came together so that when I retired from the Army, I never looked back. I didn't miss it for 1 second. I still get to keep my toe in the water with it a little bit because I serve as the Reform Movement representative to the Jewish Welfare Board, which oversees all of the military chaplains. So I still stay connected with that work a little bit. So that's been fine. Then I look at the rabbi part of my career, and I work part-time for Temple Chai. I'm employed officially 75% time. And that kind of works out great for me because 25% is a significant amount of time to have off, to have flexibility, to be with the family and to not work at quite the same frenetic pace that I did for most of my career. On the other hand, I love what I do, and I do not have hobbies that I'm dying to pursue. So the prospect of being cut back to working less than 75% is not a welcome one to me. And I think I would be more in the Joel Sherman camp than in the Joe Newman camp of how I would experience being forcibly pushed further into retirement at such point as that is going to happen. So that's something I really struggle with. And what I'd like to hear from the folks here, since you all have had this experience that I have not had, is were there things you did or were there things that now you wish you had done to commemorate retiring that would have helped you to, what was the expression, to mark the important transition as a community, to reflect on and use as a teachable moment? So is it just fading off into the sunset, or is there something that you would recommend to me that, you know, at such time as Temple Chai says, thank you very much, you know, vaya con Dios, how can I capture that moment in a meaningful way? Hey, Barbara.
Hi.
Hi.
One thing, Rabbi, that it didn't come to pass, but I offered it and they understood what I was trying to say, is I retired at age 75 and they said, okay, it's time for the young folks to pick up, and I've passed on as much wisdom I can at this point in time. But I offered my services as, quote, a consultant for whatever hours they felt may be appropriate. I said it could be a day a month, could be 2 days a month, whatever that may be. But that's something that you may want to think about is, can I quote, be a consultant? Can I take on a specific program that I believe I could be of great value. They could see that you could be a great value. And it's not necessarily saying it's 10%, 20%, or 50%, or whatever it is. It's a program that you're going to take from the cradle and bring it all the way to fruition.
Mm-hmm. So, Barbara, we're talking about the chapter of transitions and commemorating transitions in a ritual way. We each shared a ritual moment in our lives that was meaningful, and we heard all kinds of creative ideas, from shutting down a child's bedroom when they moved out, to washing the dishes together with the women in the family after the Passover Seder. Frank spoke so beautifully about just this past weekend passing on his wife's jewelry to their granddaughter and sharing the story of each of those pieces of jewelry. And we were talking about retirement, and I'm the only person, thus far who is still working. So I was looking for ideas from people about how they commemorated their retirement in meaningful ways, or things that they wish they had done to commemorate their retirement, to ritualize that moment. I think that, the important thing about a ritual too is it gets our attention about the fact that the transition is happening, so that the moment is not just fleeting. And what comes to my mind, and we have all experienced it, is that agonizing thud of the earth on the coffin at a funeral. People experience the loss of a loved one, even immediate family members, and when there's no ritual commemoration about that, there's no opportunity for a sense of closure. And I think I think that's an important part of what we're doing when we create a ritual of transition, is to say, this something important is happening here, and we want to capture that and remember that. We don't want it to just go by and then in hindsight look and say, oh yeah, I retired, I shut down my parents' house, whatever it might be, and it just went completely unnoticed. So, Barbara, when you look back, what was it? A wedding, an event in the life of a grandchild, a birth or a death, or something more mundane that we might not even think of, and yet you can say, wow, that was a meaningful ritual in my life?
Probably the first thing I'm thinking about is my father's passing, which was in 2003. And although I had been to, of course, many family members and other, funerals and shivas and whatnot, it was, we were here, they were in Philadelphia, and going back to Philadelphia with all the children, and everybody went back, of course, and there had been all these, we knew it was imminent, that it was coming for a while. Of course, it's not always, of course, but he had been ill. But the whole thing of the way Jewish funerals are run, the way they are, we had a wonderful rabbi there, and in fact, it was a rabbi who had done some training at Temple High years previously and had taken on, it was interesting, he'd taken on many of the traditions and things that were happening at Temple High. We talked about this afterwards, but being at the cemetery where I saw my grandparents, it went way back at that cemetery, and it's the first time I was there, and it was my immediate family. I don't know, the whole closure of that. I've really lost a parent now, and and the coming together. I mean, it's not the first time that I was at a Jewish funeral, but it was the time that I lost a parent, you know, somebody immediate to me. And it just really, and I see Frank has left, and I feel this must be so hard to talk about in front of Frank. And I apologize, Frank, if you hear me, I'm thinking about that now. But I think it was that whole ending and all the Shiva and everything, and then coming back to Phoenix and having something at home here with friends here and sharing stories and memories. I think that's what hits me more than anything. I can't say from my own retirement that I ever felt an ending in that way, because I was a teacher, and then when my kids were little, I never went back to teaching again until they were in high school, and I only went back as a substitute teacher at that point, because I always felt like I wanted to be with my kids more than being with other people's kids. And I always did so much for my husband, and that never ended. Steve always had me doing things at home. So I didn't have the same kind of transition as far as retirement went. And I was just, as far as that goes, I was just waiting for the next phase of being a grandparent. And it's continued to today. It's still happening. And as we speak.
Yeah, you're definitely immersed in that experience.
Yeah. So again, I'm sorry to Frank. I loved being part of that parade. I probably missed some discussion about that earlier. And I might have to, I'll probably put you on silent before I completely go, so I might hear you a little longer. But you don't have to hear that.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Rabbi, I've got a medical office looking for me, and I'm going to
there you go.
call and give them a bunch of information. So
bye,
everybody. See you next week.
All right.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah, maybe it's a good time to wrap up. A lot of people have things going on. We can pick up next time with, there's a few more opportunities for ritual creation that the book suggests, and then looking at what are some of the elements that go into creating meaningful rituals. So we can, we'll get together next week and we can think through and talk about all of that. Are there final thoughts that, oh, look, Barbara's showing us the Shayna. Let's unmute, see if we can unmute her. I'm trying to unmute you, Barbara, but I think you have to unmute yourself, but yeah. Let's see if we can say.
Here we go. Say bye-bye.
Hi, who is this beautiful?
Bye-bye.
Tell us about.
Bye-bye. Crow kids, goodbye. Mwah.
Mwah.
We're still half asleep.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Good. All right. I think it's nap time for everyone.
All I was going to say is that, you know, I may be giving people, you know, I really enjoyed working. Oh, here.
Uh-oh. So start again, Joe.
What you know, what prompted me, you know, I had always told first of all, the job I had when I moved to Phoenix was supposed to be my, quote, retirement job, because it was supposed to be nice and easy. And I wound up working harder in that job than I ever did in anything else.
Yeah, how about 15 hours a day?
You know, anyway, when it got to the point, I said to my manager at the time, because I, unlike Joel, I was in sales, but I wasn't working fully on commission, so I was drawing a salary plus. And I said, as long as it's still fun, I continue to do it. But when I hit 70 and a half and I had to start taking my required minimum distribution, and it started throwing me into a category where I had to give back half of what I was withdrawing, it didn't make a whole lot of sense for me to stay any longer. So that was kind of what convinced me to move on. But, you know, after that, I took a year to try and figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I kind of hooked into the MIM as a tour guide. And Carol will tell you, I spent probably, when they're open and working, I'll spend 3-4 days a week there, you know, doing tours and other things. That, you know, I just found kind of a home there. And yeah, I'm not getting paid for it, but still it's giving back to the community and doing something I think is worthwhile. So that's the second part of it is you know, I had a gentleman when I was in my 30s. I think I mentioned it before. He retired at 55, and one thing he taught me. He said to me one time, he says, you know, retirement isn't the lack of work. Retirement gives you, as they think they said in the book, they called it rewirement, gives you the opportunity to do what you want to do instead of what you have to do. So that's a kind of a change there.
Thank you, Joe. I know we've got a lot of our folks who are very engaged at the MIM, and that's a win-win. Other final thoughts before we adjourn?
Well, back to what Frank was saying, I had a marketing public relations company, and when Benjamin was born, I stopped that, but I did pick up a lot of clients as a consultant, and worked when I wanted to, and and it was very fulfilling. So sort of eased off. Totally not working, which was nice.
Good. Well, I will look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow, maybe at Socialize While Distancing, at the Shore Services or Torah Study, or wherever our paths cross. But I wish everyone a good day, a good week. Thank you so much for checking in. It's so nice to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take good care.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.